Today on Your Questions Answered, I'm answering a question from Alex Workley, K5X. Do you have any links for tools you use, line markers, glue bottles, etc.? So I thought what I'd do here is I'd go through some various categories here, talk about some of the tools I've got, I'll talk about what brands I've got if I remember what they are, and then I'll try and leave links for them down below. I don't actually have any affiliate links here. I have no affiliation with any of these companies. These are just tools that I've purchased and I've been using. So I'll try to leave some links just so you can see what the real product is, and then locally you'll have to try and find some links for those products if you can. So hopefully this is helpful for a lot of you out there. So the very first thing here is pens and pencils that I use when laying out, or even sharpening for that matter. So I just use these Staedtlers generally. The brand doesn't really matter as long as it's a 2B pencil. It has a stronger little lead on the end of these standard wooden pencils, and it gives a darker line, so I prefer the 2B over an HB, for instance. I don't really use mechanical pencils. I'm not a big fan of them, so I just stick to the standard pencil, but it is something you could work on. So if anyone has any ideas or examples of decent mechanical pencils, do leave that down below. And then just a basic Sharpie pen. This is just a thicker one. I use it to mark out the bevels of my plane blades and chisels. You can use metal layout fluid as well, so that's another option. Then I'll move into a marking knife. The one I have here that I use most is a Swan Morton knife, and you buy just the handle separately, and then you buy this pack of 50 blades, which are these scalpel style blades. So I will leave this down below. This is not the cheapest option. Stanley does have an option, and I'll leave a photo of it up here if I can find it for you, and it uses the same sort of blades, but it's a lot cheaper because you don't have to buy the separate handle and then the whole pack of blades, so that could be a good option. And I have one other marking knife that I do use sometimes. That is just a very basic eye gauging arrowhead knife. I don't tend to use it because I prefer the double bevel like this, because that's what I started with, so I prefer the double bevel style rather than the flat bevel with the diamond point, but it is another option, but I don't personally use that much. I got it to try it, and it just doesn't work for me. Then basic layout. So just a basic steel rule here. This one happens to be a Spear & Jackson. I'm not sold on any particular brand. This one is nice because it's got full millimeters and half millimeters, but I generally only work in full millimeters, so the half millimeter is of not much use to me most of the time. What you want to make sure you get with a ruler is that it's not just paint on the top, and that it's actually engraved into the surface. So if the paint wears off, you don't lose your marking on your ruler, and you do want these double-sided ones. I find are the best. Then I move into a buy that I bought halfway through this year, I believe it was, and this is a folding Hallerford's from Sweden recreation of a traditional fold-out ruler like this, and I like using this. I like the traditional look of it, and it's dead accurate. It works well, and can't remember the exact price, but it was fairly inexpensive that I was able to pick it up, that I got two of them. So, yeah, that's another option. I don't always use it. I interchange these two, and obviously I come into squares. So what I have here is an aluminium eye gauging combination square. I think it works fairly well. It stays square. I've not had to re-square this at all. The only thing that I have had go wrong with this is this screw failed, and I bought the combination kit, which I don't really recommend. I recommend just getting the compass and the center finder bits that attach are kind of worthless, I think. So I actually had two replacement screws from those parts that I don't use, so I do recommend getting this, and I'm sure the design of the screw has been improved since I got this about 5 years ago now, I think it is. So I've had this one quite a while, so and it's still square, so that's what you can really ask for. Ultimately, the main reason for one of these is for your square, and if it stays square, it's accurately square, it's going to keep you accurate. So I think these eye gauging ones are pretty good. There are obviously a lot more expensive brands out there So you can shop around, but the eye gauging ones, value for money, I think they're not too bad, and it has stayed accurate, as I said. Then some of the other squares that I've got are these traditional style. So this is a vintage style, no named brand brass. This is a Joseph Marple's new one that I bought of it. I'm not sure on the price of these at the moment. When I got this was only like $30, so it was not a bad buy. And you can get them in various sizes. As you can see, this one's shorter. Sometimes the blade here is a little bit fatter on them. Dark stock, light stock. It doesn't really matter, and they come in a whole variation of sizes. So that is something that you can look up for, whether you're getting it vintage or not. And I will leave my video down below on how you actually square these up, because if you buy these vintage, you have gaps under here that you got to clean up. You'll have to clean the stock up. You might have to re-square it and check it for square and all that. So that's just something that you want to do if you're getting these vintage style. And still on the marking and layout is a flat-backed tape measure that I've got here. This one's from, what was it, Fast Cap, and it's in what they call the Pro Carpenter range, but it's got a flat back, which means it's great for at the bench for marking. And unlike most of your standard cheap rulers, this head part here does not move. It's fixed accurately because it's designed for you to do the measurement from the inside and pull it across a mark. And I have used this constantly since I've got it. I like to use it for layout. You've seen me do marking of lengths and stuff at the bench with it, and so I've found it to be dead accurate, just as accurate any of my steel rules. I've got a meter long steel rule as well that I use sometimes, and this is just as accurate as that. So do look down below for this one as well. And then marking gauges. Now, wheel marking gauges like this one happens to be the Cat's Moses one, and I know for getting these here in Australia, it's not really a cheap option anymore. I got lucky and got free postage when I purchased these, and that became viable to Australia. But for some of you in the US, if you're not aware, I believe it's called KM Tools, is Cat's Moses' tool site, and he has these, which look fairly similar to the Tight Mark, I think it is, marking gauges, so it might be worthwhile checking them out. In terms of other options, I haven't really tried any other options, which I might start doing and do some reviews on a bunch of them so I can recommend others, but this is what I've been using. It is the micro adjust style, but I know there are other brands out there like Veritas that do make a lot of decent marking gauges, but they can be quite pricey, so it's something to watch out for, but this is what I use. So in the clamping and glue up, I don't really have too many things that I use here. First up, my main clamps are these iron clamp ones just here, the basic extruded aluminium. I've done the upgrade that Paul Sellers did do on these because these are quite bad without something stiffening them up. But they work okay. They're not the most fantastic, but for their price, I think they're actually not too bad. And I have them in, I think it's a 600 length and a 600, and I think the other one is 900 that I've got. So they're the two sizes I use in that. Then F-clamps, I tend to just use these shorter F-clamps. These were just a no branded one from a local woodworking store. You do want to make sure that they either have the clip on this side or like this one has here, that it actually grips as it moves along so they don't drop, so you can actually hold them in place and then screw them up. The other thing these clamps have is this handle looks like just a standard handle, but when you start applying the pressure, it releases here and it free spins when you've put pressure on, so it'll only go to a certain amount before the handle just free spins and you can't do it up any tighter. So that is a pretty good feature and I've been pretty happy with these. Along with that, I have just a standard wooden screw clamp like this. I have them in this larger 10-inch size, and I think I have some down in a 6-inch size. This happens to be Dakota brand, which is just a local branded woodworking brand, and they work like all of these sort of wooden hand screw clamps do, and they work well and apply quite a bit of pressure, and very versatile for holding all sorts of things around the workbench. And then glues. So the glue bot, I've been using this quite a bit recently, and it stops the nozzles like in this one here that just dries up on the top and then the glue won't come out. Because it's under gravity, it slides back down. And the glue bot is by Fastcap, so the same manufacturer as the tape measure here. They're making some great tools, and the glue bot, although sometimes under pressure it can be a little tricky to get the glue to come out, I find that you have less waste of glue and it's just easier to apply, especially on weird angles. This will still glue, whereas a normal bottle like this won't. The glue that I've got on here that I've been using recently is Titebond 2. Other ones I have used is this Sally's Aqua here, which is an external glue, so I kind of like these external glues, but I'm liking the Titebond more at the moment because it's a little bit easier to get a hold of some of the times, at least locally here where I get it. So in the bench plane range, I have mainly vintage planes, but I do have these other offerings here that are brand new, so let's go through these new ones first. So this is a brand new Stanley Bailey, which I was advocating for a lot as a brand new plane. Here locally, this has got really expensive and more expensive than the local Lubins that we've got here, so I'm not really recommending that as much unless you pick one up cheap for a scrub plane or a rough removal, because they're getting too expensive brand new here. But if you can pick up the brand new Stanley Baileys where you are at a reasonable price, I think they're still a good plane, but they don't quite have the fit and finish as you would expect of it, the vintage Stanley planes, or even these newer Lubin Qiansheng planes. So these Lubins, or also known as Qiansheng, they're also a similar design to the Wood River, which has been modified for you guys in the US and Canada. Here in Australia, Lubins are at a very, very good price point. They have a really good fit and finish. And if you're interested a little bit more in the Lubins, particularly these bevel down ones, do check out the review and unboxing. So I'll leave them down below for you. Then here, this is a number 5 low angle jack. I haven't had this one long. I wanted to just speak to people about these low angles and what I do and don't like. I haven't got to that yet. I haven't done a review on it yet, but that's why I ended up picking this one up, to try and give you some good content and how these compare to the standard Bailey. So that's why I have this one. I'm not advocating at the moment that you just go and pick one of these up, but this is also a Lubin. Then what I advocate the most for, maybe not this exact type, but I have all types of various agings of vintage Stanley hand planes. This one actually happens to be quite an old one. I believe it's a Type 6 from 1850 something, but you don't have to get one this old. I got lucky and picked this one up at a good price, but we have all sorts here. We've got vintage records like this one, vintage Stanleys like this one that's in a bad state that's not been restored. Generally, I pick them up quite cheap, around that $30 mark. So, yeah, there are a lot out there, and not just limited to Stanley and Record. They're probably the two more prolific, at least here in Australia. But you also have Pope Falcon here in Australia, and others that came out with plastic handles, which I don't really like the resin handles, but I do know that in the States and in the UK, there are a lot of different brands out there that use the exact same Stanley Bailey design, and they work well. So some of you from those countries that are familiar with your local brands that you know are good quality, do leave them down below to help everybody out local to you, and because I just can't speak to all of them because I'm not aware of everything. I'm only really aware of here in Australia, so I just thought I'd mention that, and you guys can help each other out down below. And then other planes that I do have, just a standard wooden coffin plane, very basic. You can pick these up inexpensive. Do check out the video that I'll leave down below on this one, what to look for when buying used hand planes so you don't get a dud. And then there's also these transitionals which have the inner metal workings of a metal hand plane and then a wooden sole. These are also a great buy if you can find them. They work well, easy to flatten, easy to use. If the sole is in bad state, it's easy to replace, and so they're another great option too. So in the chisel and sawing category, let's jump in with the chisels first. So I use vintage and also brand new. More recently I've been using the newer ones more than my vintage style. So the vintage kit here is actually a Ward kit. Obviously it's had new handles put on it, and this is not a bad kit. However, I did have some problems, and you can get some problems with vintage chisels. I had problems with this one because whoever sold this had sharpened these on a band sander or something like that, and the tempering had actually been wrecked for at least half a centimeter on the very edge of these, and so it was like it just kept wearing off, and so I had to keep sharpening and sharpening and sharpening until they actually retained an edge. And so that is something that you've got to be aware. People do want to sell these, they don't know what they're doing, they can wreck the tempering, and vintage chisels can be very expensive, which is why I advocate for some more inexpensive brand new chisels such as Lubin and Narix, because they make really decent quality chisels. They've got some more expensive cryo ones that have some of the hardest toughness of any chisels out there, but generally you're less likely to get burnt using brand new chisels versus vintage ones. So this is my very first new set. This was actually my very first set of chisels before I ended up with a full set of vintage ones. This is a 6-piece Lubin from 25mm down to what was it, about 5mm. Now, the Lubin chisels, I think they're actually a really good buy. They have good steel, good edge retention, sharpen real easy, and I can't fault them. Now, obviously, Narix is, I would say, is in the same group, although I've not used the Narix chisels. From what I hear from most people, their cheaper ones work just as well, and I don't think they're really any different to these, although you can see on these, they've got big milling marks and stuff, so the fit and finish on these is not fantastic. It's at its price point, heavy machining. You could go ahead and remove them. I haven't bothered because it doesn't affect the use of the chisel, and for a cheap chisel, I'm willing to just put up with the ugliness of it. But if that did bother you, maybe look at some of the Narix ones that have slightly better fit and finish than these Lubins. And then what you've seen me been using recently, and that is Japanese chisels like these. I believe these were blue paper steel chisels, something like that. I'll see if I can find the name. I wouldn't really expect any of you to go out there and get these, but maybe these are a good gift for someone because they're not cheap, and so only if you're really into it would you want to get these. But there are some cheaper options when it comes to some of these Japanese chisels, which I believe probably work just as well as these, but maybe don't quite get as sharp, and maybe they don't quite have the edge retention of these ones. But they do work well. They work fine for Western joinery. You've been seeing me use them in videos, but I do use these, and I use them quite a bit, and I really like them. So maybe that's something you guys might want to consider. Let's move into hand saws. So I think I'll jump in with the cheapest offering, which is just a basic gent saw. It's a joinery saw. This one here is Greaves & Sons. This one was like $30 or something. This one here is a PAX longer one with very fine teeth. These very fine teeth are very difficult to sharpen, and so this one is, I believe, a 12 teeth per inch, easily to sharpen. This one, I believe, is an 18 teeth per inch, and that's starting to get pretty difficult to sharpen. Look how fine those teeth are. It can be done, and if you do want to see a video on me sharpening this, do let me know down below, because I have sharpened it once. I can show you how to do it. It's painstaking and a very slow process, but it can be done. So that is another option. PAX gent saw. This is a 250mm gent saw versus this one being a 200. Not much in it, but the extra length is always more accurate and a little bit easier to use, in my opinion. Then we move into standard, normal tenon saws. I did an entire series on these Spear & Jackson saws with all the numbers and everything, so I'll leave the links to these down below and where I picked them up. And do check out that series on these, because I go through setting it up, correcting the handles like this one has been and this one here, how to sharpen them, how to reprofile them, all of that. And along with that, I also did the panel saws here, which you purchase them, they're already in a crosscut, so you can resharpen the crosscut and then reprofile one of the crosscuts into a rip cut, which is what I think I had to do with this one here. This one was already in a rip, so I'm going to leave them down below as well. Panel saws like this one, whether it's a Diston, which was the most prolific maker, I think, throughout history of hand saws. There's also Spear & Jackson, and I'm sure there's a host of other makers out there, so do leave them down below if there's other makers that you've had good luck with in the vintage realm that I'm not aware of. This one was actually my dad's, so I keep it around, I use it, it's a good saw. And if you'd like to see a video on what to look for when buying these vintage so you don't get ripped off, do leave that down below and I could maybe make that video for you guys. The last saw that I use is just a standard, this is a made in Australia, I forget the brand of this one, but you also get the replacement blades like this, so it's possible this one's an Eclipse along with these Eclipse blades, 14 teeth Brinch as you can see there. And yeah, you always want to have a set of blades because these quite easily broken if you use them wrong, or you twist it slightly wrong, or it catches. You can easily snap these, which I've done in one of the videos that I was making for you a while back. So if you want to see a video on how to use these, how they operate, how to work with these traditional ones, do let me know down below, because even the operation of the new ones, it's just a different frame, but the blades still operate the same. So leave that down below if you'd like that. So in this category that I'm just calling specialist tools, it's kind of a catch-all for a bunch of various tools that I didn't feel was worthwhile just putting in its own category, so I thought I'd just lump them all in together here. So we've got everything from driving screws, drilling holes, finishing timber, ploughing grooves and other things, shaping, and the like. So let's start with our drilling and screws and all of that. So first up, I'm going to start with the vintage drills. So I have this chest or breast style that's designed to sit here. It's double geared. This one was an Onyx, I believe, when I looked it up, so they were quite prolific in making these, but there's definitely a lot of other makers out there, a lot of German makers and European makers of these, and so they're very common if you can get a hold of them. I found this one fairly cheaply locally, and they work well. They got a great action, especially after you've cleaned them up and put a bit of grease in them. And then the more common style you're probably going to see is this egg beater style. This is a Miller's Fall number 2, which is arguably apparently one of the most best selling egg beater drills on the market that was ever made. If you do get one of these, try and get the double sprocket here and at the bottom. They run so much smoother and work a lot better. And these ones also hide vintage drill bits in the back, so that's something to look out for. Now we're going to jump a little more modern for a sec, and we're going to look at cordless drills. Now I consider this a hand tool. It's battery operated. You don't have to get a DeWalt. Any of the brands work quite well, other than some of the really cheap ones. But if you're getting started, even some of the very cheap ones will get you started. And to be honest, it is easier to use one of these, especially when I'm doing things myself and I don't have to go through some rigmarole to hold it, so I can use two hands to use the egg beater ones. And sometimes it's just easier because I'm filming myself and I want to get this done quicker. I tend to default to a battery drill, and this was just the one I happened to pick up. It was the cheapest one at the time, and that's why I've got DeWalt. But I'm not set to any particular system, but once you do start with one, you usually get more tools within that system. So yeah, it's up to you. I don't think it matters the system. As long as you have probably a brushless one, I think they're the best to go, less likely to break down. But a quality battery drill is a very good option. Along with that, we obviously need ways of driving screws and drilling holes. So when it comes to drilling holes, I actually have two sets. In the past, I've only mentioned this X-Torque set, which you could buy replacement drill bits for, which It's actually getting harder to buy these replacements, so I'm still missing some of my smaller ones that have snapped. But this is a Cobalt 28-piece high-speed drill kit. It's designed for wood and also for metals and other things, so it's always good to have a decent universal set of drill bits, in my opinion. And these are quite simple, these twist bits to actually sharpen, and I'll leave that sharpening video down below too. What I picked up recently is actually this set of, I forget the brand. They're brad point bits, as you can see here. They have a point on the top so they don't wander, and they're perfect for timber. I believe these were fish bits or something like that. They're a German maker, I believe. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong, but a good set of brad point bits is great when you're working in timber. And then along with that, kit of drivers. This is just some universal kit that's got more Phillips, because obviously most people are using Phillips these days. This has the pH 1, 2 and 3 in here. It has square drive. It does have one flat drive and a couple of star drive and hex drive, so the little kit like this that covers everything is actually a good option, and you can expand from this quite easily. I picked this one up for about 20 bucks. It was on special, so yeah, just some cheap little driver set, but I do find that these steel style are a lot better than those little muck metal ones that you get that have the little magnetic bit on them. So these are not magnetic, but they're way stronger, because I used to just break those other ones all the time. They'd snap because they were weak. And then the final thing in the drilling and boring holes is braces. We cannot forget about braces. Along with braces, you need a set of what's called square tapered auger bits. This is a full kit. You might not find it as a full kit. Sometimes these full kits can be quite expensive. I wanted the full kit, so I did fork out a little bit more for these when I got them myself. But you can buy some modern ones, and okay, they're not quite as good as these vintage style in my opinion. But if you can't find anything else, they will work as well. So yeah, if you got the square taper, you want vintage style, but if you get the new style, you can't really use them with one of these without getting an adapter, because the double jaw that they have on these is designed to hold a square tapered shank and not the hex shanks that the modern ones tend to have. So that's just something to look out for, but you can get the attachments that go in here. They do exist. So let's move into shaping timber next. So the first thing, obviously, I do a lot of shaping with these two. You can get rasps. I don't tend to use the rasps because I haven't found a decent quality, really hand-stitched one, and you kind of want a hand-stitched one because it leaves the surface much better. You don't have to, but yeah, so rough file, smooth file, rasp. And then the other major tool that I use all the time for shaping timber, especially when you're doing handles and anything in a round shape or an odd shape, is spoke shaves. Whether it's a new one like this 151, this happens to be a Falcon brand, but it's in the same styling of the Stanley. It's a very common design. It's a very useful and good time-tested design. And I also have these modern ones like this, which is from the Melbourne Tool Company, this particular one, and they work okay. I'm probably going to do a review on this and a comparison to the 151 coming up soon, so if you do want that, do let me know down below, and I might bump it up the list and make it sooner. And the other thing you're looking for with spoke shaves is both flat and round bottomed. Most of your work can be done with a flat bottom spoke shave, but when you start getting into too tight a curve, you need a curved bottom, and that allows you to get that tighter engagement. Now, there are videos out there on how you can modify particularly these cheaper 151 styles, and you can file the front here to round it off to allow you to get in tighter and maybe avoid having to buy a round bottom, but I've not done that. So if I can find a link, I'll leave one of them down below so you can check that out yourselves. So now I'm just going to look at these specialist planes. Now, do you need to get a Stanley 45 or a 55? No, you most certainly do not. Does it come with a good array of blades? Yes. Do I recommend it? Do I use the array of blades all the time? No, I don't. I got it more because I like the history of the tool, and I was able to get it fairly inexpensive along with a lot of the box of the cutters. But these can, if you find them cheap, can double well as a plow plane like this record one here. They do have a longer sole, they do have some extra things going for them, but I don't think it's really necessary, but it is what I use, so I'm going to include it here, and it is something that you could definitely use and is quite versatile, especially with some of its molding attachments. Was it as popular as buying individual planes back in the day for doing various molding things? No, it wasn't. So there's actually not a lot of these, as I understand, that were sold, even though they were sold as the Rolls Royce that does everything. So they can be finicky to use, but they do work well, and I still do like using it. But you do have other options like the plow plane here. You can buy brand new offerings of plow planes. A lot of them don't have a full handle like this. The new ones have got a little loop of metal for the small ones, and so that's why I opt for a vintage style in the record, because I prefer a full handle to hold on to instead of looping my fingers on a little bit of metal like the likes of the brand new Lubins do. So I'm sure there might be some other brand new makers out there, so if you can't get the vintage ones, if anyone knows of any other brand new makers of plow planes, do leave it down below, or maybe where you can find them. And really, the plow plane is a one size fits all purpose plane for plowing grooves. For the bottom of boxes, the backs of cabinets, the panels of panel doors, all that sort of thing, you plow your grooves using one of these instead of an electric router, and it does a very good job at that one thing. And obviously I mentioned the 45 just before. It does all sorts of things based on the blade that you can put in them, extra skates for extra support. So in figured wood, I actually like using one of these for ploughing grooves because it has an additional cutter on the other side of the blade with the skate. So yeah, both of them work well for different situations in my opinion, but if I was going to get one, I'd get the small plough because I think that's the most useful. Fit and finish stuff that I'm using here. This is a Melbourne Tool Company recreation of a number 60 something cabinet scraper. I'm drawing a little blank on it. This works really well. You've seen me use it a number of times. Works well. It operates just like the vintage ones from what I can see, and I've had no problems with it. But it's good to have something like this that can scrape your surface a little bit more aggressively. And then you want to have card scrapers that can come in behind that, and obviously you've got to turn a curl correctly, so if I remember I'll leave some links down below to videos where I show you how to do that. But to turn those coils, and along with that you need something that's called a burnisher, or there is another tool called, it's a little carbide tool like this called it's from Blackburn Tools in the US, and yeah, it's a carbide. Accuburr is the pending name on this product, and that works quite well if you're not into using freehand. It does a reasonable job, so I'm going to be doing a review on this at some point soon, so do stay tuned for that one. So that rounds out most of the tools, but I did forget one, and that is the special mention of the Veritas shooting plane. Now, do you need a Veritas shooting plane? Not really. Why did I get the Veritas shooting plane? Because I, at the time, only had vintage hand planes, and they never made vintage hand planes to be square for the wing to the sole, and so for the purpose of using them for shooting timber, you need that to be accurate. And not one of these ones that I have here in my vintage styling was square. So I did persevere. I did use some of my vintage hand planes, and I didn't 100% get them accurate using it, and I got frustrated. And so I ended up saving up and getting the Veritas shooting plane. These come in a right and left configuration, so right hand, left-handed. I'm obviously right-handed, so I got the right-handed one, and it suits either a right or left-handed person on your shooting board. Now, they also have other things where you can buy specialist shooting boards and stuff for these. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I've just put a piece of wood that locks this in a track, and I use it on my normal shooting board, so there's no problem with that. And I can't argue with the results of this. You can tailor it in. It is technically a bevel up hand plane, adjustable mouth, all of that sort of thing, and so you can really tailor this and get accurate results with it, and it does work well, although it is expensive. So I don't know that everyone would be jumping at this, and maybe the better option for a lot of you out there is to get something like maybe a Lubin low angle, which these do have the wings square to the sole, and they're quite a bit cheaper, probably a third of the cost or half the cost of that dedicated plane that only really does one task. These are the tools that I use, and I use quite regularly most of these. Some of them are other options that I don't use as much, but some of these specialist ones, when you need them, and I use them when I need them. So that's kind of what it is with hand tools. You don't need the tool until you need it, and in some cases, if you don't need it for a project, you're better off not buying it until you find out that you do need it for a project, and then you do have it for future projects, which is what I've done. I've not just gone ahead and bought all of these. I've bought them over time, building them up. Some of it is things that I've bought to review for you guys, so you don't have to go waste your money, and I can give you my verdict before you decide to go buy something. And that's just part of, obviously, this YouTube content creator space. But some of you graciously pay for supporting me, and that's partially why I like to buy these tools and give you those reviews, because of your generosity, and also the amount of views and AdSense that's coming in, which is slowly increasing on the channel, and that allows me to buy more tools. And so that's why I've got more new tools coming into the fold, because they're always an option for somebody to buy new if they can't get vintage, as the costs of vintage tools are really skyrocketing these days. So if you liked this video, please do like and subscribe down below. While you're down there, do sound off in the comments, as I've mentioned throughout this video. Any recommendations that you have for tools, maybe something that you use, you could leave down below, and where you could find it. Other recommendations for squares and other things like that that you've tried and you like and recommend that others could use, we'll leave them down below. Obviously, this is just my take, so I would like you guys to have your input in there as well, because some of you are very, very knowledgeable, more knowledgeable than me, in fact, and more experienced with some of these various tools, so do leave that all down below. If you'd like to see another Your Questions Answered video like the one you've seen here today, do check out the playlist up here that's got all of the Your Questions Answered, and maybe your question is actually already in there and already answered. And if not, do leave your questions down below, and I might feature it in a new video. Bye for now.